Hello, my name is Nirvana, and today I will be talking to you about the plasma membrane. So to begin, the plasma membrane also serves as a barrier for the cell and is semi-permeable. Semi-permeable means that it controls what materials can come in and out of the cell. This is essential to the protection of the cell and provides a more stable environment. This stable environment contributes to the homeostasis of the cell because it keeps out unwanted materials. So when we begin chemical composition, we want to discuss the phospholipid bilayer, and the phospholipid bilayer contains fatty acids and alcohols that essentially help protect the cell. And the phospholipid bilayer has two layers, which are the hydrophilic and hydrophobic layers. When we begin to talk about proteins, we must talk about how there are two different types of proteins, and those are the integral and peripheral proteins. An integral protein is firmly embedded into the phospholipid bilayer and can serve as a channel, a transporter, and a receptor. The peripheral proteins are attached to the surface of the membrane and can be easily removed by changing pH levels. This is comparable to the integral protein because the integral protein is firmly embedded and is unable to be detached easily. So, proteins do two things that are very important for the cell, which are transporting and receiving. By transporting, they move the molecules across the membrane, and when they receive, they are receiving the molecules. So, there are two different types of transport when talking about cells. Active transport requires ATP. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. An example of active transport is sodium-potassium pump. So in a sodium-potassium pump, sodium ions move out of the cell while potassium ions move into the cell against a concentration gradient. Passive transport does not require ATP, and an example of passive transport is simple diffusion, when molecules move directly across the cell membrane from higher concentration to lower concentration. That way the molecules are able to move freely. Facilitated diffusion is another example of passive transport, but this is when molecules have help from channel or carrier proteins to get across the membrane. Osmosis is the movement of water molecules across the semipermeable membrane from a lower solute to a higher solute. So in order for these molecules to transport, there are two factors that are very important, and those factors are size and solubility. So in comparison to size, smaller molecules are easier to diffuse across the membrane than larger molecules. And when talking about solubility, there are specific molecules that have an easier time crossing the membrane, like lipid-soluble molecules. And a lipid-soluble molecule examples are vitamins A, D, K, and E. These types of molecules pass easier across the membrane and makes it easier for it to transport.